The issues they seem to grapple with is housing, and that's a problem in the ACT as well. It seems obvious to everyone except politicians that the problem is supply being way south of demand, which is bad enough, but it will be exacerbated by increases in immigration, which is another federal issue. Now, you've got an interesting example down there of new release of blocks of land that were heavily subscribed. Can you explain this story to us?
Well, basically, the ACT government has what they call an infill policy. So they want 70 to 80% of all new dwellings to be infill in existing areas. So that means either dual occupancies on larger blocks of land or medium to high density developments. They keep calling it urban sprawl if you suggest that they release more freestanding homes or blocks for freestanding homes. The last time they did it, they released, I think it was 70 blocks. And the ballot to get your hands on these 70 blocks was subscribed by about 7,000 people. Now, if that doesn't tell you that demand is outstripping supply, I don't know what does. But if you bring that up, they say, oh, well, you want to just continue urban sprawl and you want to kill the green tree frogs. It's absolute ludicrous. But what it is the ACT government is broke. And if it actually does expand and supply more homes, it's got to provide more infrastructure, and it doesn't have money for that.
Well, there's a new poll out today showing that support for a republic has dropped since Queen Elizabeth has died. And this is the third poll to show this. What's the feeling about the monarchy in Canberra these days?
Yeah, I think it's about the same as everywhere else. I saw a poll by the local newspaper only today, and it's basically couldn't better described as a left-wing rag. And even its poll had a marginal tilt towards maintaining the monarchy over the republic. But I said to a few people this week that the arguments in favour of becoming a republic have always been very sophomoric and juvenile, and they've only gotten more so in recent times, whereas the arguments in favour of maintaining the monarchy have become more sophisticated. They've gone beyond the if it ain't broke, don't fix it argument. But I think the real thing holding the Republican movement back is that those leading it are just such insufferable prats.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, for one, they haven't got their finger on the pulse because they didn't pick how Australia was going to respond. And also, they just don't seem like the kind of people you would trust. You know, they'd certainly put themselves forward as potential heads of state, as they call it. I prefer to call it a president. But, I mean, you wouldn't have one of those, as I said earlier, in charge of a chook raffle, let alone presidency of a nation, would you?
No, exactly. And I think the greatest strength of the monarchy, particularly in a constitutional monarchy, is that the monarch sits above the political fray. Now, regardless of whether you have a president elected by the parliament or a president directly elected by the people, that person has to be a politician. It's the only way it can work. And that means that our head of state is part of the absolute cesspool that is Australian politics at the moment. We've just talked about the bubble over Parliament House. It just becomes another occupant of that, whereas the monarch sits above that and doesn't get involved. I know that you got people like Paul Bongiorno and the like trying to rewrite history at the moment and say that the Queen was complicit in the dismissal of Whitlam back in 1975, which we know is not true. I mean, every investigation has proved otherwise. But the reality is that King Charles III will sit above all of that, and that's the best way to maintain things, in my view.